there's one last thing missing from our dashboard, and that's the CreateOffer form. So let's start by creating a new section under our dashboard. CreateOffer. Create a new component. We will then display it in our dashboard. Again, putting some spacing in between. Now we will replace the dummy data. We start by creating a new card component using a new card component. We add some divs for styling. Here we will create the CreateOffer form component. This form will accept two parameters. One will be an onSubmit function, which we will define shortly, and the other one, loading state. Let's also create this component. As we said, this component accepts two parameters, so let's define the interface for that. We will put values as any for now. We will define those later. And loading as Boolean. Now we can import this CreateOffer form into our CreateOffer component. And start defining the onSubmit and the loading state. First, we can make the post to the create endpoint of our API. Again, making use of the use Axios hook, which will provide us with the loading state. We will define our CreateOffer handler. This will, of course, return an IPLIN transaction. Let's import that. As the URL and method, the endpoint will be offers create. The method will be post. Of course, we want to mark this request as a manual request. So we only call it when the user clicks the submit button. Now that we have this in place, we can go ahead and create the onSubmit function. This is an asynchronous function which accepts some values. We accept any values for now. We will define those later. We make our API call, which returns a data object, which we will rename to plain transaction. Calling the CreateOffer method with data or values. Because now we have formatted the token amount. We will have a formatted token amount as values. As the user fills the form, we will need to parse this amount. So we will replace the offered amount that we will receive from the values. And we will parse by token ID. This method will accept the offered token and the offered token amount. Since this function is not created, let's go ahead and add a new helper. As for the formatted token amount, we will get the token data using our getInfo helper. Let's make this asynchronous. Next, we will return the parsed amount, which we will import from SDK DApp. This method accepts the amount and the token decimals. Now that we have that, we can go ahead and import it in our CreateOffer component. Once we get the plain transaction response, we can go ahead and send the transaction immediately. As before, this method accepts the transaction's object. Transaction display info. We don't want to redirect after signing. And that would be our CreateOffer component for now. Nothing changes so far. In the CreateOffer form, besides defining the interface, we need to define the interface of the form itself. We will create a new interface. This is how the form will look like. We get the offer token amount, the accepted token, the accepted token amount, and the accepted address. Since the accepted token is an NFT or SFT, we also add the accepted knots. Now, as we can see, our values that we have previously defined as any we can now define as a CreateOffer form interface. Next thing we would like to do is to add some initial values for this new interface, so our form will be empty by default. Let's do that. There are some typos that we want to correct. So, these are our default values. Next thing, we would also like to have some validation schema for our form. And for that, we will be using yup. So, we will import object from yup, shape, and we will define the shape of our schema. And we will set our offer token to be a string, which is required. Let's import string from yup as well. The offer amount, the same. The accepted token, the same. The accepted address, the same. But with one more test. We want to make sure that the accepted address is a valid address, so we can test that. This is the name of our test. This is the message in case it fails. And this is the callback that creates our test. We will check if the value is null. That's definitely an invalid address. Or we can also check for address is valid, which is a function used in SDK dApp, so let's import that as well. Lastly, we need to add our accepted amount. Which is as well a string and required. Next, we can build our form. Let's start building our form using Formic. We pass the initial values, we pass the onSubmit function. and of course the validation schema. Now, we define our form. Let's also import it from Formic. We can also use the helper functions of Formic. Here we will define our input fields.